as Anthony Carter, better known as the Mighty Gabby. He is an 8-time Calypso king, folk singer, actor, activist, and cultural icon. He's made a profound impact through his work, passion, and dedication to cultural development. He has consistently used his gifts to uplift those who might otherwise go unheard. In recognition of his significant contributions, he's been named a cultural ambassador of Barbados, and I'm going to add this in. He's been teaching at St. Leonard's Boys School and has formed the 100 Voice Boys Choir. If you don't get a chance to hear them, Google them or go on YouTube. They are phenomenal. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Carter. Fabiola Mendez is a Puerto Rican cuatro player, singer, educator, and Emmy-nominated composer, focused on the exploration of culture and identity through storytelling. Her music is a blend of folk, Afro-Caribbean, and jazz, showcasing the cuatro, a 10-string traditional guitar out of Puerto Rico. She's recognized as the Latin Artist of the Year by the Boston Music Awards. Fabiola and her band, they've performed on national stages, including the NPR Tiny Desk concerts, and they were amazing during COVID, so go check her out. And the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and the Hatch Memorial Shell in Boston, Santurce Fine Arts Center, among many others. Ladies and gentlemen, Fabiola Mendez. Lloyd Gallimore is from Panama and is a longtime keyboardist and director of the Beachers, a legendary Caribbean music group that he co-founded in 1967. For over 50 years, Lloyd has led the Beachers, blending their original Antillean song, which is rooted in calypso, reggae, and mento, with modern arrangements and technology. Ladies and gentlemen, Lloyd Gallimore. And she's in the process of saying goodbye to our Prime Minister and wrapping up a bilateral, so bear with us. But our moderator is Ms. Michelle Mouchette. She is the UNDP's Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, and she'll be moderating the discussion. It promises to be inspiring and illuminating, so please feel free to get involved in the conversation. These conversations about culture as a tool for development need to go much further, and culture as a tool for development needs its own forum right here in Barbados. Everybody agree with me? There you go. So ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Michelle Mouchette. And you see how important this woman is? There's somebody keeping her seat warm until she arrives. She is going to be with us in a couple of minutes, please. Oh, she's here. Yes, there you go. On cue. Ladies and gentlemen, Michelle Mouchette.
Thank you for waiting. I must confess that we were engaging in a very meaningful conversation with Prime Minister Motley that just reinforced the importance of the conversation we are about to start here. This is probably a bit unusual in a ministerial forum, having a panel with artists and creators and engaging with them, but it has several reasons behind it. The first is we are here to reimagine development in our region, to deconstruct some of the constructs that we have been advancing in the past years and recreate. And here, in this stage, we have people that every day build and rebuild, construct, deconstruct, that tell our own story in a very particular way that we might not find with that level of clarity in textbooks or in policy analysis or in other documents. We find in them also the possibility of recognizing ourselves, recognizing how are we part of the same, and you start with that, Gabby, in your intervention. As Latin America and the Caribbean, we are the same, but we are different, and there's a beauty in that. And you do that with the different genders and styles in which you work and combine. But it also has the purpose of helping us regain trust. in our capacity, in our uniqueness, and the creative capacity that we have as a region. Latin America and the Caribbean is the birthplace of unique genders in the different artistic disciplines. We are the birthplace of the steel band. We are the birthplace of the calypso, salsa, bolero, tango. Things are very unique to us and that we can appreciate separately, but we can appreciate combining them depending on what we want to achieve. We are also the birthplace of the bachata. We are the birthplace of the realismo mágico. And I say that in Spanish because I think that's one of the most beautiful literary examples that we can have. We're the birthplace of the crónica. So we have a capacity to innovate, to create, to reinvent ourselves, and we need some of that in the policy, political, and development arena nowadays, in which, as Prime Minister Motley said, we can't continue doing exactly the same that we have been doing. And there are a lot of good things that we have achieved in the past years, so this is not an idea of starting from scratch, but we need to deconstruct ourselves somehow to start rebuilding ourselves. And as Regional Director of UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean, you might have realized very quickly that for me, it's impossible to position our region in the global landscape only thinking about where our challenges and fallacies and risks and weaknesses are. My work is to position our region from their strengths, from the capacity, from its uniqueness, from its richness, from its culture, from its strength, and from there, use those strengths, those capacities, to find solutions to our challenges. And this is the idea of this panel today, to see how what you do every day, through culture, through creations, through arts, through connecting with people, and through what you produce and you do, we can learn from you on how can we extrapolate that to the development arena, to the policy arena, to politics in times in which the world is more polarized than ever after. How do we find a common language? How do we revisit our storytelling as a region? How do we go beyond the language barriers and we speak a common language that identify ourselves and that allow us to cooperate, preserving and respecting the differences that we have that are part also of our identity. And for this, I would like to start with you, Gabi, if you allow me to refer to you, to Gabi. You are a cultural ambassador, and the Prime Minister, Mia Motley, at some point referred to you as a national treasure. I think we all had the privilege to realize why was that. And I would like to invite you to share with us some reflections on how culture, how music can help us build a nation, how can help us to come together around a shared identity, and how can we extrapolate that not just to our national identities, but to our regional identity as Latin America and the Caribbean. Gabi, what a privilege.
Thank you, my dear sister. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who stayed to hear this panel discussion. Firstly, we must remember that culture is not just about dancing and singing and writing and so on. Culture is us, the way we walk, the way we talk, the way we educate ourselves, the way we live, the way we die, the way we marry. That is culture, and so much more. And I have always said that in every single country, and in particular Latin America and the Caribbean, that if we had a ministry to be named, and we had two names, and those two names were culture and education, that we should call it exactly that, the Ministry of Culture and Education. Whereas on many occasions you find that they would name it the Ministry of Education and Culture, when in fact education is but part of culture. So once we establish that, then we can go ahead and understand what is culture to us. As my dear sister said, we have created so many rhythms, so many beats, that it's amazing. In fact, there is no area in this world that would have created more rhythms, more beats, more original music than Latin America and the Caribbean. My sister talked about salsa, merengue, and so on, calypso. Reggae is also part of it. And we could go on and on and on. And we could go into Cuba, because Cuba has created, I would say, the most. And all the other Latin countries have joined in and put their own stamp and their own originality and their own creativity to these different rhythms and so on that we have. These rhythms move our people. They make them dance, they make them cry, they make them reminisce, they make them look forward to the future. And at our weddings and our parties and other gatherings and so on, we play these rhythms. And we don't just play it for ourselves, we play it for the whole world. And in fact, there are so many occasions we can point to other people who do hybrids of what we created for their own culture, for their own benefit. But collectively, we are yet to cash in on what belongs to us, because the rest of the world have copied it, they played it, they have lionized it, never to our own benefit. So it's about time that we get together as a region and see how best we can go about as a collective entity to make sure that we get maximum return for what we have given the world. Because it is not fair to us that other people, you see it in movies, you see it in plays, Broadway, you go up to London and so on, you see it. But is there any time that it is mentioned that it came from Venezuela, or that it came from Costa Rica, or that it came from Mexico, or it came from Cuba, or it came from Jamaica? The answer is no. And it's about time that we insist that they put the stamp and say, from Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you.
Gracias, Gaby, for sharing those reflections. Now, I would like to continuar la conversación contigo, Fabiola. En tu trabajo, trabajo es difícil resumirlo en pocas palabras, pero algo que es muy característico es cómo logras mezclar, unir diferentes géneros, afrocaribeños, folclore, jazz, que son maravillosos y extraordinarios en sí mismos, pero cuando puestos juntos también pueden lograr un nivel de belleza, de innovación tremendamente particular.
That is very unique. Jazz in particular is precisely one of these musical genres that is very difficult to know its origins, where each interpreter gives it their touch, improvises and plays, and they use it as a tool for diplomacy. I'd like to ask you to share with us in this meeting where we are thinking about how to develop our democracies and strengthen our democracies. What can you tell us about this creative process? What can we learn from this capacity and necessity to be flexible and to be able to adjust and have our own style, and appreciate the strength that we have behind us and that joins us in this process of finding solutions in our region.
Saludos a todos y a todas. Muy honrada de estar aquí como representación de Puerto Rico. Como bien mencionó acá nuestro compañero,
as you had mentioned, was mentioned by Gaby, the culture is what happens daily. We are culture. From the corner where I live, the music from the mountains, my focus is to celebrate the folklore, and I compare that folklore is the cultura, how we reflect our realities, and through that empowering us. And I understand that my history has a lot of similarities with your history and the history of each one of us. When I am in the creative process, I am Puerto Rican who reside in the United States, but my reality reflects a lot all of these genres and all, from all these words of the cultures that are in the United States. As a Puerto Rican quarter player with the flavor of the mountain, it's important to see how I can connect with these everything in my surroundings. How do I incorporate these rhythms of the Afro-Caribbean inheritance, which is also important, as my colleague mentioned. For me, the wealth of the Latin America and the Caribbean is that we have so many influences of what is coming from Africa, with all the genres and all the music, the inhabitants of these territories mixed with the indigenous people and the European influence, which come from the colonial times. All of that is so rich that one says, how can we continue this musical creation process? Music and art is, as we said, it is in constant movement, and sometimes one finds it a lot of challenges when we are talking about traditions and general genre and musical genres. But human beings sometimes want to put definition to everything, and we want to box everything. And it is important that we define and have terms so that we can understand ourselves. But in the end of it, for me, music is representing all this wealth of what each one has to contribute, and that is what I try to reflect. I come from Puerto Rico, from the mountains, but also I reside in the United States. But I also have my surroundings of people from different cultures. When I listen to them, this is like, oh my God, I enjoy what these people are doing. How can I incorporate a little bit of that song in my music, for example? It is I don't know what to say. It's like a reflection of who I am, and I think that each one of us, from in our spaces, if we apply the same rule, just to say who I am, and how all this forms a beautiful space for us as human beings, I think the world will be a better place. Thank you. Thank you very much, Fabiola. As she has said, culture is in constant movement. One of the challenges, but also of the beauties of all those of us who work in the developing world. The developing world is in constant movement, and it represents the need to review and reinvent. But also, just like you are artists from our region, born and bred in this area, and you have the capacity to do it. I think that there's no difference between artists, politicians, ministries, authorities. We come from the same region from that same wealth, and we have that same capacity, creative capacity to reinvent, and we apply it through different means. You do it through music, and first, for us, we have to do it through public policies, but there's a similarity which is important, and which is the cultural dimension, and it has to be contemplated when we think about how we design our development models in our countries. Daria?
You are an artist, but you are also a psychotherapist and a drama teacher. And I must confess, if someone would have told me when I was deciding what to do with my life that this was possible, I might be seated on that chair instead of here. But it's so wonderful to have you here, because if you listen to the interventions that we had in the inauguration of this forum, from the Prime Minister, from Jose Manuel, from ECLAC, myself, and all the interventions that we listened to, it's very clear that our societies are living under enormous levels of uncertainty, pressure, anxiety, insecurity, Prime Minister Motley just referred to a society that is somehow living under a post-traumatic effect, probably as a consequence of the pandemic, that tends to emerge, not immediately after the shock, but afterwards. And one of the challenges that we policymakers have today is that these kind of crises, be it climate-related, health-related, and any other nature of crisis, are emerging, are complex, are compounded, and are going to be somehow part of our normality in the coming years. So how your experience can help us navigate the main purpose of this forum, that is, how can we develop social protection systems that are more resilient? How do we contribute? And at the center of the social protection system, and these big words, is the human being. It's a person with fears, with dreams, and with a very dramatic loss of sense of agency that is at the core of the concept of human development. So you work with people. You work with people and you use art to build resilience in human beings. Tell us a bit of that, because I think listening to you could be very useful for us when we sit together and think about how we translate that personal experience at the individual level to policies and frameworks that can allow us to facilitate that for our societies and our region in a bigger way. Varia.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction and the question. Did you all hear the question? It was multi-layered. It was a lot of different things, from policy to where I am and what I do. So maybe I'll start there. I'm a creative arts psychotherapist, and most people do not know what that is. And so, having come back to Barbados from the UK with this qualification, I find I'm explaining it and selling it even. So it's a form of psychotherapy, and we use the arts in all of its modalities, in music and dance and movement and fine art and drawing and poetry and creative writing and storytelling. We are very client-centered and we meet the client where they're at. But what we are trying to do is use the arts to address whatever is in the room, which is sometimes about healing, sometimes it is about wholeness and balance. So what I find I see most in the room is something more to do with identity and belonging and freedom of expression, to be who you are and to express what you want. That's what I see in the room most often. We work with individuals and we work with groups. And so you've asked some really large questions that I'm thinking about in terms of not just what happens in the room, but on a much broader scale. And I want to say that we in this region, especially the Caribbean, we are still reeling from the aftermath of the transatlantic slave trade. We are still reeling from colonialism. We are still reeling from the pandemic. And in between all of that are natural disasters, hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanoes. This is a lot to deal with intergenerationally, and people wake and live and see. And when I have someone in the room, an adult or a child, they're carrying something that didn't belong to them at first, that was way before that. And so how do we address that? And how do we address that through arts? What we do is allow the space for expression of feeling. And when Gabby came here and he sang Emerton, and you saw the look on his face, I have not listened to that song without crying. When I allow myself to experience what he is in fact singing about displacement, about fear, about anger. All right, I say I will go. You tell me to forget, are the words of that song. And so much of what we have inherited has been about suppression and repression and oppression, to tell us to forget and keep it moving and act and smile and be the Caribbean and Latin American people who smile and dance. And yes, we are, and therein lies our resilience through our many cultural forms. So I go back to that when we're looking for joy. Through carnivals and experiences of festivals and what we have here called crop over. Experience that to the fullest because we are resilient and we are still here and we can still move and we can sing and we can dance. And that's what we do in the room, to remember to come back into the body and remember who we are and hold a mirror up to ourselves and say, this is who we are. But we can't always be joy, 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 right? Allow ourselves to feel deeply, to feel what Emerton is singing about. And so that's part of the work, putting a mirror up to ourselves. And when we talk about culture, everything about our culture is not beautiful. And so we must create spaces for reflection to see what can we do and who are we? It's not always pretty. There are parts of our culture that speak to the way that which we see gender, that needs revisiting and needs reflection. And that's just one example. Prime Minister Motley spoke of the underbelly of poverty, allowing people to see who they are and recognize that they are people still, through the art forms, through movement, through poetry, but creating spaces for expression. So you've asked me some very difficult questions on a policy level. Creating spaces for reflection, creating spaces for pauses and breath and understanding of who we are and allowing ourselves to feel it deeply. It is, if I asked everybody in this room to get up and sigh and asked you how you are and say, express that through your body, we would be having a different meeting, but a meeting, I suppose, that leaves you thinking and feeling. So that's it.
Thank you, Varia. This is extraordinary because it's embracing who we are in the bright side and the dark side, and this applies for us as individuals, for us as communities, as societies, and as a region itself, but it also applies for us as decision makers. It's not only what decision makers need to know in order to craft policies and make decisions vis-a-vis the future of development in our region, but also to acknowledge that we, each of us here, are part of that. We're part of that story. And we need to recognize ourselves as part of that without fearing, because there is where we connect with the rest of the society, the rest of our communities, the rest of our countries, and hopefully the rest of our region. So I think it's a very deep reflection, and perhaps we need some more time to breathe, to connect, and to recognize ourselves as individuals and ourselves as a collective that can push forward transformation, but for that we need to know who we are. And that's fundamental for us to advance our missions, our work. This room is full of courageous people, accepting the challenge of leading today and trying to make decisions to solve the challenges that we have requires courage. But at the same time, we need to be aware of this, because all the decisions that we're making goes to impact the lives of people with these complexities from within. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Lloyd, you are, y no sé si seguir en español o en inglés, porque eres precisamente un reflejo de lo que es ser América Latina y Caribe en un solo cuerpo. Tú vienes de Bocas del Toro, de Panamá, de una comunidad eminentemente caribeña, no solo porque está en el Caribe.
Eminently Caribbean, not only Caribbean, but culturally you have preserved those traditions, and you have, of course, been a reference of that identity, Caribbean identity, in the Caribbean and in Latin America also. And in those two contrasts and that the uniqueness that we have, you have been an important protagonist in the instruction of social cohesions at different levels, and preserving identity and creating cohesion, and when we extrapolate it from the you and through your music, the public has been converted. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how music that has permitted to be a vehicle to create this social cohesion, how necessary it is, and a cohesion which preserves the differences, but it brings the people together at the same time. Hello, thank you, Michelle. My name says it all. Lloyd George Gallimore Goff. Mis padres, por el lado de mi padre, eran de Jamaica, y mis padres.
We're from Martinique, so I have a mixture. Okay, but I'm going to go in Spanish. He sido una persona que desde joven
Being a person
he siempre
from
tratado de
small, I've tried to look towards an object, a fixed object. When I left my secondary school, I returned to the capital city towards Boca de Toro, which was basically a plantation, a banana plantation of the United Fruit Company, a later named Chilkill and Company. And I found myself in a situation where I studied music since as a child. I studied piano with private teachers and the National Conservatory, but it was not my main objective, but it was always in my heart. It was in my blood, okay? I returned to Boca de Toro after graduating from secondary school. And I was employed at an office where I was next to the executive, the president of the company, which was American. And I found myself in the situation that there were three cultures in Boca de Toro: the American on one side, the local one, which was the Afro-Caribbean and the Antillians, and the third group was the Latins from the Panama region. And when one of those happenstances, there was a night activity which involved dancing from a group from a church, and there wasn't any orchestra, and they called me. Well, you play the piano, create a group, and let's make music, and so we can have a pleasant night. And that is how. And I noted that we were segregated. The Americans on one side, the black person on one side, and the Latin on the other side. And I said, this can't be. I said to myself, this can't be. So I proposed to join those three groups through music. And I invented what today is the group called the Los Dichers, which we have since 1966, for example. We are now 50-something years old now, since the beginning of the group. The next activity, the following activity, which was done, was in the open air, and for the first time, I think, I am almost sure that we were able to bring the three ethnic groups to come together in one space in the open air, and they're shared. And for me, that was a great satisfaction to see an American mixed with a black person and somebody from the Latin colony, and then we had a real ball that night. And for me, that was so satisfactory to see them in an open, totally open space. And but what am I getting at? What's my point? That motivated me to continue strengthening the group to such an extent that we started to win over all those persons that were in that mini province. It was one of the least populated populations because we are also isolated. There wasn't any streets that connected us to the rest of the country. We either had to go by boat or by plane to the other parts. So and that's where the English came. We started to develop that product which we call Beachers, and we, in a space of 1.5 years, we were able to consolidate this union. So beautiful to see how we shared all these three cultures in one, which nowadays is normal for it now. You see me, I was married to a Latin. I got married to a Latin person. My brother met a person who was from Cuba. He got married. He got to her, etc., etc. To give a few practical examples, and thank God that province has taken on a united sense of development. And I am so satisfied. I'm so happy that when I return to my country and I see so many mixtures of culture, sometimes I just break out in tears to see it all. You also make us put us in tears. You must be very proud when you return to know that somehow, with the power of the music and the creative capacity, you've been able to contribute to that become a reality. That's a public policy, not just taking decision, but you can create ability to connect the community. That's very powerful. I want to thank you all for this opportunity, your excellencies, the distinguished delegates. I hope that you were able to, just like me, not only to listen from the intellectual point of view, the wealth that we have here, which we have to deepen even more. I hope that you've heard them from the heart, who you are, what is our origin, what it is that we have in common, and this makes us unique. And I hope that this helps us to navigate through this day and the discussions that we have, and which will be very intense. And we must find solutions under pressure where the region finds itself now. I hope that we can do it with a little bit of music, with a little bit of creativity, with a little bit of pride with regard to what we are. And what is beautiful or what is not beautiful is our reality, and it is on that based on that reality that we are navigating. And we have a region that is extraordinarily rich and powerful, and on the which we work. This is, as Varya says, this is not a question of taking decision making by party makers. This is the work that we have to do with people understanding that those particularities and how this social protection system that we must design. We hope that this can help us to confront not only as individuals but collectively the different shocks that we are going to be experiencing in the next years. I thank you all with my heart. For me, as a director, regional director of the UNDP, to coordinate this event, this discussion, which was put us in a different level and another place to connect us from there. And I hope that the results will result in benefits for our dear Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Michelle Mouchette. She is the Regional Director of UNDP. Thank you so much. That session was extremely insightful. For me, as a member of the creative community, I wish that we could have an entire forum dedicated simply to the work of creatives and how we can take this movement forward using culture and the arts as tools for development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a warm round of applause. Now, I just wanted to let you know that we are running behind. It's been a busy morning. We're running behind, and we're trying to catch up. So our next session, which is thematic table 1, it focuses on adaptive social protection systems for vulnerable populations. The moderator is Rita Ciara. She's the inclusive growth team leader with UNDP LAC. And we're also going to have on that opening panel the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs here in Barbados, Minister Kirk Humphrey. Also the Minister of Social Development and Assistance, Family Affairs, and the Fight Against Hunger from Brazil, Wellington Diaz. And the Vice President for Gender Equality in the Caribbean, Parlaméricas, Lisa Joher. And the Minister of Social Development of Chile, Javier Toro. Now we're going to break up this session because, as I said, we're running behind and we're trying to get back to where we want to be. So we're going to start this session and run from 1 o'clock to 1:30. So what we're starting with is the opening panel. The ministers will make their remarks. We're going to break for lunch from 2:30 to 3:30, and then we'll come back with the other members of that panel giving their comments and their observations and asking questions as well. So this thematic table 1, adaptive social protection systems for vulnerable populations, will be in 2 phases. It is going to run from, we're going to break at 1:30. At 2:30, sorry, my apologies. We're going to break at 2:30 for lunch. Okay, say that again. We're going to break for lunch from 1:30 to 2:30, and then we're going to continue with the ministerial remarks and the other reflections and observations with the ministers when we come back. Now, we want to keep the lunch hour tight to 1 hour because we want to get back on track to where we wanted to be in our agenda. And we want the thematic table number 2, which is the 6th meeting of the presiding officers of the Regional Conference on Social Development of LAC, to start at 3:30 sharp. So let us call the members of this panel to the table. Minister Kirk Humphrey, Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, Barbados. Minister Humphrey. Also, Wellington Diaz, Minister of Social Development and Assistance, Family Affairs and the Fight Against Hunger from Brazil. I'm telling you, Gabby is a global citizen. Every minister who's passed here has hugged Gabby before they went to the stage. Vice President for Gender Equality in the Caribbean, Parle Americas, Lisa Javier. She's hugging up Gabby too. I'm telling you, he's a global citizen. And the Minister of Social Development of Chile, Javiera Toro. I now invite the moderator, Rita Chiara, Inclusive Growth Team Leader, and she's hugging Gabby as well for UNDP LAC. Okay, the trick is to move Gabby from the entrance to this stage. Yeah, move Gabby. There you go. Thank you very much, the mighty Gabby. So we're now about to start this session, ladies and gentlemen. Thematic Table 1, Adaptive Social Protection Systems for Vulnerable Populations. Rita, I hand over to you.
Gracias. ¿Me escuchan? Es un placer inmenso para mí estar aquí
For me to be
hoy.
here
He
today.
vivido más de
I have spent more than 10 years in an island which I love a lot, an island shared by 2 countries, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, working also on the reduction of poverty on the side of both governments. And here, for each hurricane, I had a tropical storm, and for every drought, all the people, the most vulnerable people that we had to protect, they felt that we were back to square one. That tenemos que start over again, and this has increased. We have seen how frequently it has increased, and every time it increased, all the efforts that we have done for these persons who have come out of poverty return to poverty, and we have started to reflect profoundly on that the traditional system of social protections have to be a step again. And I remember very emotionally when the DR government, we put a survey on the homes, putting the first step, which has to be a reflection on the new systems of protection, social protection, which we call social protection systems adaptive, where we have to take into consideration the climate change and the reduction of risks. And that is why I have a great pleasure to be here with these 4 other panelists to speak on this topic.
this table number 1 into session. We're going to have half an hour to discuss with the 4 panelists, and then after the lunch, we are going to have a discussion with all the other ministers who would like to share with us their experience from their countries. I have the pleasure to have here with me Mr. Humphrey, who serves as Minister of People, Empowerment and Elder Affairs of Barbados, has been at the forefront of social protection policy in Barbados, focusing on inclusive and resilient social system. His ministry leads efforts to ensure that social programs are adaptive to changing needs and vulnerable populations in Barbados. Thank you so much, Minister. Mrs. Javier Toro Cáceres, Minister of Social Development and Family of Chile. She was appointed by